Hello and welcome into the DePaud, a DePaul Hoops podcast, coming to you live for the first time as part of the Big East Energy Network. I'm your host, Andy Thompson, with my co-host, Nick Palazzolo, and together we're going to be talking about DePaul Blue Demon basketball twice a week for the next however many weeks. Nick, look forward to being with you, and we've got a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it.
Look to his shot. Spins, fade away. Yes, sirree! Chandler hits the three.
Oh, tough shot. Giving it up to Reed.
Well, it's been a while since I've heard that intro, and it's also been a while since we've kind of been in this format talking Blue Demon basketball. Just want to give a quick thanks to Mark Zanetto and Casey and everybody else for the opportunity to hop on with Big East Energy. We're looking forward to keeping this going, and like I said, bringing DePaul basketball to you twice a week on Spotify, Apple, and wherever else you get your podcasts, as well as the Big East Energy YouTube channel. So, Nick, it's good to see you. Just how you feeling about the season, man?
Yeah, I'm excited. You said, in the open, we're doing these twice a week hopefully until middle of April. Let's be realistic. That's probably not going to happen, but hey, it's college basketball. We are recording this on Sunday, November 2nd, the eve to the college basketball season, and there are a lot of reasons to be excited for this DePaul squad.
Agreed. Before we talk about that, I do just want to kind of tie in the previous episode we did. So the last episode was, I believe, 11 months ago. We talked about the Mercer game, which was the third game of 34 that DePaul ultimately played last year. They went 14-20. And I remember our other co-host, Dibbs, was worried about a local product named Marcus Overstreet, who, if I pull the box score up here, I believe he had 8 points and 2 rebounds in a game that DePaul won by over 30 to match its previous win title from previous win total from a season prior. So I think the Blue Demons were all right in that one. But that was the future, and this is that was the present, and this is the future. So, Nick, let's debrief the two exhibitions we saw, because there was a lot to break down from both of them, I would say, especially the first one against Loyola.
Yeah. I have an overarching thought, but it's more of a Nick ranting on officiating that we can get into a second. But let's talk Loyola, and then we can talk about the Fighting Irish. That game was really interesting to me, because exhibitions is interesting in a unique way, where it's a game, it kind of counts, but it doesn't really count. Teams really aren't really running their sets, it seems. You're trying weird lineups, weird combinations, right? There really are no rules, right? You're going to have players play a little bit longer with fouls than you normally would. But it was interesting, and I think we are both on the same page with this, and a couple other people agreed. DePaul took the Loyola game like an exhibition. Loyola took the game as they were trying to win the game.
Yes.
So there's different lines of thinking. That's why exhibitions, just kind of in the grand scheme, are really interesting. But I thought, out of the Loyola game, is a 92-90 overtime win in an exhibition game that took way too long to be played, almost a 3-hour college basketball game.
2 hours and 45 minutes for an exhibition.
But yeah, which is crazy. But we saw good things in spurts. But let's talk about Caleb Banks, because that is interesting to me. CJ Gunn fouls out in the second half, and then Caleb Banks kind of finds a second gear. And I think if you read in between the lines of what Chris Holtmann has said, Banks needs to find that gear from the jump. And I think a lot of DePaul's success in the non-conference will be about, because again, Benson, Gunn, and Blocker, I think you can cement those three. But Banks is kind of the X factor in that perceived starting lineup. Again, that things are fluid, but that is what is going to be the X factor for the starting group, in my opinion. But I think we really just need to see, 40 minutes. He's probably not going to play 40 minutes, but a complete game. We can't see like a spurt of not bad basketball, but then have him find an extra notch. He needs to find that motor from the jump. I think that was kind of my biggest takeaway from the Loyola game, just talking in a roundabout way about what I saw that day.
No, I would agree. And I think last year, one of the biggest things that we saw and that we kind of noticed until the tail end of the non-con, because obviously last year the team had 13 new players. They hadn't really, played with each other much, even in the summer, because it was kind of a disjointed summer for reasons that we're aware of. But I think that the thing that I saw in that game, and I agree with you, is that you kind of saw a bit of that come back, where it was like guys didn't have – some of them at least, when RJ Smith even alluded to on Friday in media availability, maybe a bit of it was nerves, just getting ready for the season, but there wasn't really that sense of urgency that, you kind of come to expect from a power conference basketball team. And the two front court starters that we anticipate to have in most of the regular season, if not the entire regular season, hopefully, Caleb Banks and NJ Benson at the half, they had, I believe, 5 points and 1 rebound combined. And as you mentioned, both of them stepped it up. NJ Benson does finish with 12 points in that game. Banks finished with 14. They kind of commanded the second half prior to the overtime period and really led DePaul through that spurt. But I remember in the first game, Caleb Banks told both of us that, when CJ Gunn fouls out with, I believe, 11 minutes to go in the second half, he does kind of step it up because he is kind of that next man up mentality. And I think that's something that we both agree you probably want to see a bit more of before one of your teammates fouls out, because you just want to kind of have that aggressiveness and intensity right from the start, which I think we saw. Yeah. We'll touch on Notre Dame later. I know you weren't there, but you got a box score.
Sure.
Definitely saw more of that in Notre Dame, but as far as Loyola goes, I 100% agree with you. Yeah,
and I think this Loyola game, like I said, exhibition games, again, Chris Holtmann said it. I don't think you don't need to belabor the point, but he takes a lot from the play, not a lot to the result. DePaul, 2-0 in exhibitions. Who cares? Okay, yeah, exactly. You got to be ready for a Chicago State team that DePaul should be worried about, because we had Southern Indiana game 1 at Wintrust. Chris Holtmann's game. That game went to overtime. That should not have went to overtime. And it was just, the Loyola game was fascinating to me, because exhibitions, you take certain things, but then you don't put in a lot of stock. Going back to I think it was DePaul Basketball Media Day, where we both were, and this can kind of tie into Notre Dame in a second. Command Maker, I don't know if it was you or somebody else in the media contingent asked about Command Maker. St. John's transfer, who played in one game, ironically, versus DePaul, essentially burned his red shirt because he played meaningless 3 minutes in that game. But Chris Holtmann had an interesting answer. He's a young player who hasn't played a lot of college basketball, and there will be stretches where he's making mistakes, but we need to put him out there to let him make those mistakes, simply for the fact that he hasn't played a lot of college basketball. So I thought going into the exhibitions, Loyola and Notre Dame, we would see an extended run of Command Maker. And that's something we never really saw. He played 7 minutes and 6 minutes, so about 13 total minutes in 2 exhibition games. And I think that's interesting because, again, we talk about it all the time with starting lineups. You always want to have quality backups. I think it is fair to say, again, on November 2nd, that your starting lineup is Layden Blocker, Brandon Macklin, CJ Gunn, Caleb Banks, NJ Benson, barring something unforeseen or a coaching staff decision. I think that's a pretty safe 5. But who backups NJ? And Kaman, again, I think is easily in that scenario. But I found it interesting. Holtmann talked about him wanting to play through mistakes and then only giving him a limited amount of run in an exhibition game. I found that fascinating.
So obviously, because of scheduling conflicts, you were at the women's media day instead of Notre Dame, and I was there. And I'm going to answer with, I think you and I both know that this is the deepest front court that DePaul has had reasonably in at least the last decade, if not sooner, if not prior to that. Because you've got
without a doubt,
you've got NJ Benson, you've got Caleb Banks, we both talked about. You've got obviously Kaman Maker, you've got Jeremy Lorenz, and you've got, I think, the biggest surprise of either of these two exhibition games. And I would also say probably part of the reason that you didn't see as much Kaman Maker, especially at Notre Dame, where he only played 4 minutes all in the first half. Teo Pierre-Justin has clearly taken a massive step forward. He started, Caleb Banks, it sounded like was a bit under the weather, and then obviously he wasn't going to start NJ because it's an exhibition game, so you're gonna play with some things. You're going to see what guys have.
That lineup told you against Notre Dame, you exactly what Chris Holtmann thought about exhibitions without saying it.
Correct, because your starting 4 was Jeremy Lorenz, and your starting 5 was Teo Pierre-Justin, who are both going to be good players on this roster, but neither of whom you'd probably start at the power conference level, and that's no offense to either of those players. But with that said, in the first half, Teo Pierre-Justin plays 11 minutes, and in those 11 minutes, he gets 7 points and 4 rebounds and plays, I think, the best defense I've seen, exhibition or not, since he's been at DePaul. He was getting aggressive with guys. He was staying in front of them. He was making good reads offensively. He also had 2 assists in that first half, and he finished with, I believe, 3. So he has clearly taken a step forward. And so I think you've got an embarrassment of riches at the backup 5 spot to the point where you could have a night where Kaman, like maybe tomorrow night against Chicago State, we see Kaman, really start to show himself as like, okay, this is who I am. This is the work I've put in over the summer, because you've seen flashes. But I think Teo has really made it interesting where you may not need to see as much of Kaman early necessarily, because you've got more of a surefire insurance policy from day one, where again, Kaman can afford to play through a lot of his mistakes. But like Holtmann said to us at Media Day, they want to keep it simple for him. And I think keeping it simple for him is maybe not putting him in too much of a big spot too early and giving Teo more of those minutes so that both of them can kind of get the necessary practice they need in game reps for Big East play.
Yeah, and again, I think the coaching staff, actually I know the coaching staff, is pleasantly surprised with Teo's development. I don't want to say it came out of left field, but you and I have had conversations about just this roster is currently constructed, where it is, the 15 or 16 guys that are on it, including Amsal, not including Amsal because he tore his ACL. But we had a hard time figuring out if Teo was going to play. Like just your off-the-cuff 9-10 man rotation, we had a hard time figuring out if Teo was going to play. And again, we can get into the whole red shirt issue in a little bit here with potential red shirts and what that does to DePaul here in a second, not to get too far ahead. But Teo putting together good quality minutes and shooting the lights out of the ball and rebounding and just playing with he's found that next level in gear that I think the coaching staff kind of figured he had. It's just, again, player coming from France, played in the professional league. I can't think of what the hell it's called over there. Comes over here, plays college basketball. He got some interesting Big East play last year.
Partly by necessity, but yes, he did. He had some good flashes.
Right. Yeah, but again, flashes for a very raw player. And then he comes this year and is essentially a brand new player, like night and day, a different player. And I think that is a great surprise to have. And I think to your point, like that is partially why Kaman has the limit. I think early on, Maker and Teo Pierre-Justin probably splitting those backup minutes, pending different rotations and stuff like that, because Teo has earned the opportunity. And that is only a credit to the kid. Only a credit to Teo for just, not being guaranteed anything, but taking his opportunity. And I think Holtmann has spoke about it, but just really, really impressed with the development he's taken from year 1 to year 2.
No, I would 100% agree. And I think that his development and kind of showing that he's able to be that backup 5 at this level where he was grabbing physical offensive rebounds against Notre Dame and also against Loyola. And let's be honest, you and I both talked and we agree Loyola was not playing that game to figure things out as much as we were. They were playing that game.
They were trying to bury DePaul.
Yes, they were looking at it from the perspective of we do not have many power conference opponents on our schedule. In fact, they may not have one. I have to double check, but they might not even have a single one. And obviously they want to know in a league like the A10 where there's much less room for margin, where there's much less margin for error, and it's not typically a multi-bid league, they wanted to know, okay, this may be one of the best chances we have all year before the games really matter for our resume. And considering the physicality that Miles Rubin and Kamani Winsu and all the rest of their front court players are playing with, Teo was in that game grabbing athletic boards. He was making good reads, and he was in the Notre Dame game just carrying that on and really coming into his own in a first half starting role that I think neither of us could have predicted would have looked half as good as it did. So I think going back to our point about Kaman, I think they'll continue to keep it simple for him in these first few games. I think keeping it simple includes taking some of the load off his plate and giving some of it to Teo, and then kind of figuring out as the season progresses kind of who's ready for what amount of minutes, and really being able to plug a lot more pieces into the puzzle than they thought they were going to be able to as of the preseason and off-season workouts.
Yeah, and I think, again, going back to some of our conversations we've kind of had about this roster, is like, I think there was a point in time this offseason where, like, they're going to be a little bit more guard heavy just because of the unknown with the backups in the front court. Because there's a lot of, I don't want to say youth, but there's a lack of experience behind a Caleb Banks or behind a NJ Benson. You have Jeremy Lorenz, and unless I'm missing somebody, like, that's really Lorenz is your experienced backup, so to speak. And I think when you just kind of look at this roster, you have Fabian Flores, again, academic redshirt. Kaman Maker, 7'1". He's a sophomore. He's played one game. Isaiah
He's played
Medina,
16. Let's be clear. Okay, just real quick. Going at the end of the exhibition games, he has played a total of 16 minutes, exhibition or not, in college basketball total. That's not a lot of experience as of right now.
Correct. You have Isaiah Medina, 7 foot, potential redshirt candidate. You have Teo Pierre Justin, 6'10". I think he will help you. I think playing him early helps. I think Teo's minutes become more of a necessity or a coaching philosophy of playing the hot hand. Because yes. I just think Teo's the kind of guy where, again, he's going to earn minutes. If he's hot, he's going to play. And I think that's really how they're going to look at it. And then you have Jeremy Lorenz coming over. He's 6'8". But outside of that, again, there are a lot of unknowns with those bench roles in terms of the front court. So I'm interested to see, because again, this is the same coaching staff, but they already know what some of these guys can do. Last year, essentially, you put out a basketball, you've tried to figure it out in practice, but until the games really started, you had no idea. I remember talking to Holtmann, like, before his first season, like, before the home opener. And I asked him, I was like, Chris, how the hell are you going to determine minutes? And when do you want it solidified? Because, again, you have 14, 15 brand new players. He's like, practice. They have to impact winning on the offensive and defensive side of the floor. So they have to impact winning on both ends. Now that he knows what people can do, and he's seen it, and he's coached them, I think he can be a little bit more aggressive in his rotations. I think just because you were here last year, again, this is not a shot, I just think coaching philosophy-wise, just because you were here last year doesn't mean your minute. You still have to earn minutes. I think, again, Cruz McClure is a huge X factor. RJ Smith, a real X factor in terms of guard play. Ilya Miljasevic coming over. Again, Chris Holtmann, glowing in his reviews of his jump shot. Like the best pure shooter on the team. And we haven't touched on him. So I think it's just like one of those things where it's like there are still a lot of unknowns. And I think that's what's going to make the non-conference fun. Because they're still going to be trying things. Because last year, they wanted to get their starting lineup just solidified before like Christmas. Again, now they kind of have an idea, I would think. It's kind of what we talked about. Blocker, Macklin, Gunn, Banks, Benson. But now you got to a point, you already have a baseline knowledge. Now, what is your most competitive group?
I would agree. And I think now we've kind of talked about the front court a little bit. So let's move into that guard room where, like you said, there are a few more sure things. But one of the sure things that I'm aware of, in addition to the starters in Layden Blocker and CJ Gunn that you've got there, is especially for the guard room, and obviously Loyola was kind of an outlier, but especially in the guard room, the foul trouble, whether in the end of the first half and also down the stretch of the second half, has been in both games. And the Notre Dame game was called way less strictly than the Loyola game was. but you had multiple players in the guard room either with 3 first-half fouls or with at least 4 second-half fouls by the going into the overtime period. And so I just think that you're going to have to, as you talked about with Holtmann on Friday, have a balance of clean physicality and just figure out, okay, down the stretch, who can I have with the ball in their hand, not only from perspective of winning us a game, but also who's even going to be able to be on the floor for us to have the ball in their hand, because are they going to have too many fouls or where we might have to save them for a couple extra minutes than we want to put them in the very end of crunch time?
Yeah, and I think that this backcourt is interesting because I think the starting lineup, especially at that second guard outside of Layden Blocker, because I think CJ will play a little bit more 3 than he will the 2.
Yes.
I think that when you look at it, I think it'll be very matchup dependent. What do the coaches see on film, and who is the best guy to start that game? I think because, again, you have Ilya Miljasevic, you have Brandon Macklin, you have RJ Smith, you have Cruz McClure. Again, I understand it's a freshman, but the way everybody talks about Cruz, like, you're just kind of like, okay, we need to see it now. Because the way everybody talks about him is like, this kid could potentially be special. But again, RJ Smith and his media availability on Friday was essentially like, what we see in practice, I want you guys to see in the game because it's just that impressive. And I think, again, that's just one of those things where the backcourt, very interesting. But I think a lot of it will be matchup dependent and what does the team do well. Because, again, even though it was 2 exhibitions, Chris Holtmann was pretty pissed off about his second half starts. To start the second half, he was not happy. Again, exhibition or not, this was also a problem DePaul had last year, right? They were, especially in the Notre Dame game. Again, you can speak more to it because you were in South Bend, but I think part of it last year they went stretches where they'd get up to a lead and then they just couldn't buy a bucket. Again, started to see that a little bit at the Notre Dame game, right? Got out to a decent sized lead from the jump. And then it just kind of fell apart. And then kind of towards the end, you're not playing catch up, but you're still trying to keep the pace. So I think that'll really be interesting to see how they kind of navigate these slower starts to start the second half. Because Andy, you and I have talked about it. This is a problem that kind of started last year.
No, I think the 2 things that started last year, but unfortunately this team is going to have to work through at the beginning of a season. Hopefully it's not going to carry over as far as it did in the last year, was slow starts, especially in the second half. And I do think the starting lineup packs a bit more of a punch when you add the energy of Macklin and everybody else has to match. But the other thing they had a problem with that Holtmann did not like, especially in Loyola, but also there were admittedly in the second half some problems with this at Notre Dame that I saw, was the perimeter defense that DePaul had, especially last year, where guys were taking threes where they had as much as like 5-6 feet in front of them where there wasn't much of a contest. That's something that this team is going to have to continue to work on, because you and I both saw Loyola's point guard, Justin Moore, who I think probably put himself on at least 1 or 2 NBA radars that day with the game he had. I think he was getting everything he wanted, especially behind the perimeter, where he almost had, in some cases, he had nobody collapsing onto him. And I think that's one of the biggest things that this team is going to have to work through early on. However, conversely, as you talked to last year, this team not being able to hold on to leads, I think my biggest takeaway from both exhibitions was that this team has a heart and a drive that last year's team, just because of the overall athleticism of part of the roster, by no fault of the individual, just, last year a team could not, when you're down 11 points to Loyola, you're not going to be able to, catch up to them, let alone win that game, whether overtime or not. Whereas this team was able to rally itself and come down from that deficit. And then at Notre Dame, they had a 14-point lead early in the first half. It was a 6-point lead, I believe, at halftime. And then they were able to maintain their lead throughout the second half and make gutsy play after gutsy play when Notre Dame did go on a few 5+ point runs in that game. And they were able to finish with a 7-point victory. Obviously, we don't care about a 7-point victory in and of itself, but the fact that they were able to hold on to a lead like that, where last year, for example, at Seton Hall, a 17-point lead vanished in the second half, that game goes to overtime and they lose. That does not feel like it's in the cards for this team, because they have the fight to be able to hold on to a lead and be able to keep their composure that last year's team, because of all the new pieces, just didn't necessarily have.
Yeah, and I think part of what will make this DePaul team competitive is, as I'm scrolling through the game notes for the Chicago State game. Again, November 3rd is the earliest game that DePaul has ever played per their game notes. It's the earliest recorded day that counts. And it has an average team by height based on everybody else in the Big East. DePaul ranks second in the Big East in terms of average team height at 6'7" even. Creighton is 6'7.4. And that's it. The next closest is UConn at 6'6.5". And there has been a want and a desire by this coaching staff to get more physical. And not only get more physical from a basketball perspective, that's something I think Brandon Macklin brings a lot of. But you just got to be a bigger dude. They needed to bring bigger guys in here. Because I think there was times, especially given, what the Big East, looked like last year, there were some games that, frankly, they were just bad matchups for DePaul because they just didn't have the dogs to compete. Just in terms of like body for body, like there's not many guys who can guard Ryan Kalkbrenner, but it's one of those things where it's like last year you didn't really give yourself a chance with roster construction, and I think that was something they really wanted to focus on this year, and that is something that they did, and I think that will kind of fix some of their physicality issues and some of this to an extent. Again, still got to stop the orange ball from going into the basket. You still got to put the orange ball in the basket. But at some point, this physicality thing and just getting bigger is really, really going to help.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the biggest matchup, you would think it would have been like a St. John's or a UConn or even a Creighton that would have exposed us last year. But I think the team that just beat us up the worst last year, especially at home, was Butler, where they had a pair of 6'6", 6'7" bruisers at the wing, and Pierre Brooks and Jameel Telford, who were both now got okay. Not necessary. Too early for this.
Sorry.
They're both.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I know you'll do it again. It'll be a recurring thing. You had Jameel Telford and Pierre Brooks on the wing, who were both obviously about 6'6" to 6'8" to use a range, and they they each got about I think they combined for about 40 points in that game. And directly after that game, that was when Chris Holtmann first said to both of us and everybody else in the media room after the game that he'd been talking with AD Dwayne Peavy about making sure the team got bigger and stronger. And I think that was even over like a St. John's, like I said, that was the game where it was most prevalent. And you bring in a piece like Brandon Macklin that you touched on, and I have a huge article dropping. We're taping this, like I said, November 2nd. The article drops tomorrow afternoon, just profiling what he brings to this team. And not only physicality, he also brings a level of heart and a level of drop and a level of energy that everybody we've talked to on the team, between myself and yourself, whether it's RJ Smith, Caleb Banks, Cruz McClure, everybody has said something to the effect of he has a contagious energy that you have to match. It's your choice if
Correct.
You want to or not, but if you want to be playing to your fullest, it's an energy that you best be matching when you're on the court with him. And I think that's just something that obviously a guy like Connor Enright last year, he brings a spark on the defensive end with taking charges and having a lack of self-preservation that, really gave DePaul some sparks at times. But you didn't have many guys last year who were just going to be able to come in and be able to take charge of the team emotionally and really guide you through those stretches. And a guy like Brandon not only brings a physicality that's going to help us at the 2 and 3, and even to an extent at the 4 and some small ball, because he can handle that level of physicality just to be giving up height. A guy like him really helps you with a lot of different things, physically and otherwise.
Yeah, and I think he will be. And I tweeted this out during the Loyola exhibition. I was like, DePaul fans are going to love watching Brandon Macklin play.
100%.
Because he is just, he's got an aura, just a personality on the court.
You've used 6'7" and aura tonight already unintentionally. I hope you know that. I hope you know that.
I know. I needed to be taken out to the pasture. Like I don't know what's happening. Just if I ever do it again, just you know what? That's it. So long, everybody. Well,
you haven't said Riz yet, so you're not totally on the hook yet.
Yeah. No, thank you. Where was I going? Brandon Macklin. I think that he just brings that personality that that makes basketball an appealing product to watch. He just has it. Whatever it is, he has it. And I think that what a lot of fans have struggled with recent DePaul teams is that they haven't been an enticing watch. Like there would be some sickos who would watch DePaul basketball because it's their school, whether they're an alum, a booster, whatever, current student, through the bad times. But you'd be watching it and be like, why am I watching it? This is not a compelling product to watch. And now, again, last year we saw it. And this year I think we'll continue to see it, that this will just be an exciting brand of basketball to watch this upcoming year.
No, I would 100% agree with you. And I think the first time we'll be able to see this exciting brand of basketball, it's going to have a lot of kick-out threes. It's going to have a lot of guys getting into the paint. Because one thing with this team that what we didn't have last year was essentially, looking back on it, given the resources they had, it makes total sense. But the way a mid-major is going to beat a power conference team, especially in the NCAA tournament, is typically with lights-out three-point shooting. And given the resources DePaul had last season, coming off of a 3-29 campaign that will go down in history for reasons that we're both aware of, obviously you built the roster to be a frisky mid-major with a bunch of three-point shooting talent, but not as much ability to get inside the lane. Well, this year you've got four guys in Jeremy Lorenz, NJ Benson, Caleb Banks, and I'm blanking on the fourth. You got four guys on this roster who averaged 60% or better from inside the arc last season. So you're going to have a lot more of a balanced roster this season with, if you're not able to find anybody from a three-point line, you can just drive it inside and you can find some interior shots in the paint. And that was something this team didn't have last year. So the first taste of this new compelling brand of basketball is going to much more closely resemble Chris Holtmann's teams at Butler and Ohio State, and even to an extent at Gardner-Webb, is going to be tomorrow night against Chicago State. So why don't we take, before wrapping up, a few minutes to kind of preview tomorrow night's game with what limited information we have about the newest member of the Northeastern Conference, which don't you just love Chicago State in the Northeastern Conference? Gotta love realignment. You've got that. You've also got
honestly, this is just me being completely honest. Had you have not told me that, I wouldn't have known that. I was like, that wouldn't have made any sense to me. Because, again, college realignment, schools going to get their money. I get it. But also, come on, guys. Come on. All right. That's enough of that.
So as I was saying, the proud member of the Northeastern Conference, Chicago State Cougars, are coming in tomorrow night. So why don't we take a few minutes to preview that game and kind of, with what limited information we have about both teams, kind of piece together what might be some of the tougher matchups for tomorrow.
Yeah, I think let's take a look at. I'll take a DePaul angle. You can take more of a Chicago State angle if that's good with you. So we don't.
I've done a bit more research into the team, probably.
Probably, yeah. You have too much free time on your hands. No offense.
So do you.
This is true. I've just been reading DePaul's game notes for tomorrow and studying them. But I'm interested to see two things. Who really backs up NJ? Is it going to be a Kaman? Is it going to be a Teo? How do those minutes break down? And two, what do we see out of Cruz McClure, if anything? Again, suffered a lower body injury, was able to play about 11, 12 minutes against Notre Dame. But I think not necessarily from a matchup. That's kind of just what I'm watching for. You don't want to take any opponent lightly, but I think, again, on paper, this should be a win. But I'm just really interested to see how those two things play out, but also the impact of Caleb Banks in a meaningful game in the starting lineup. What does that do? I think that it'll be really fascinating to see a Banks and Benson front court, just kind of see how that kind of works offensively. Defensively, I think it'll be fine. But offensively, they're kind of the same player in a way, both kind of hanging around the basket. Like, as you said, both 2 of 4 players on the team that have shot, 60% of their shots from 2 or inside the paint. And I think that'll be interesting to see. But also, I'm really watching perimeter defense. because that is something DePaul has kind of struggled with in the exhibitions. I think some of it is a learning curve with the new guys that they have, just trying to pick up new systems and stuff like that. But those are kind of the things I'm watching for from the DePaul side.
Yeah, and I think on the Chicago State side, one thing that you're going to see is obviously, when we played them 2 years ago, obviously they had a super talented guy in Wesley Cardette who ended up going to Providence for senior year, and they also had some other decent players on that team. And what I'm going to be looking for tomorrow is how DePaul handles a guy. I think one of the stars for that team is going to be Marcus Tankersley, who's coming over from Alcorn State, averaged 11 points a game, 3 rebounds a game, about 2 assists a game last year for Alcorn State. And he brings a physical presence that even at the low major level, like Chicago State's a part of, he is going to present some challenges for some of the new guard defenders we have, like Brandon Macklin and RJ Smith. And I think how DePaul handles a guy like him, where even though the team may not be as imposing, like you and I both talked about, there are going to be certain matchups, as with every team, that you're going to have to see, okay, how does the team react to? Because he is not, I believe in his career, he is averaging roughly just over 30% from 3 for his career. So if you leave him open, there are going to be times where he's going to be able to make shots. And if you let him get hot, like we did Justin Moore in the Loyola exhibition, he could go for a couple, there could be 2 or 3 trips consecutively down the floor where he's just draining perimeter shots with not many people in front of him. So you're going to be looking at how do you handle a guy like Marcus Tankersley, and I think that's going to be one of the first keys of, okay, what have we learned from the exhibitions collectively? Can we stop a physical 6'5", 190-pound guard from getting down the floor and just getting whatever he wants? Because every team has players. Obviously, every team has players. We know that. Silly way to put it, but
it's 5-on-5.
Yes, it's 5-on-5. There are players on this roster. Everybody's got an orange ball. We're trying to get into the hoop. So it's been a long week for me, but a guy like Tankersley presents some physical challenges that DePaul is going to have to work through. And if Chicago State's going to hang around, he'll be a major reason why, in my opinion.
Yeah, but here's an interesting point that I kind of just thought about the way you were talking about it. And talk about the physicality. How does DePaul play physically against Chicago State? I want to know what the shot distribution is going to be like. Because last year, again, very 3-point heavy. This year it's more diverse. They don't have as many shooters. I think last year, again, there was a certain emphasis of they had a goal in mind about this is a certain percentage of our shots we want to take from 3. This is the conversion rate we kind of want to look at. Again, last year, they shot themselves into some games they probably had no business being in. But again, the other side of that coin is they shot themselves out of games. What is this offense going to look like? Like, when I think of DePaul offensive basketball, what is it going to look like? And I think that'll, for a good portion of it, it'll be a work in progress with teams evolving and all of the transfers just kind of feeling each other out in terms of what lineups work best and those kind of things. But I want to see what kind of an identity that they can build. I don't remember what it was, but I don't know if it was KenPom or some other advanced analytics site ranked coaches from an offensive perspective. And Chris Holtmann was a top. It was KenPom. Okay. Chris Holtmann was a top 25 offensive coach.
Correct. I believe he ranked 21st. I believe he ranked 21st.
Yeah. So again, Chris Holtmann knows successful offensive basketball. Last year, they had a good offense. But again, they were living and they were dying by the 3-ball. Jacob Myers seemingly had to will them early in the year just to sneak out some of those non-conference wins. So I think that is what I'm interested to see. How does the offense look? I think defense will be ahead of the offense in a certain aspect because, again, that's just how it always works. Every sport, offense is always lacking behind at the start of the year until they all figure it out. But I'm really interested to see what is this DePaul offense going to look like.
I agree with you 100%, and I think that kind of brings me on to one of the last points I want to make, and that's the fact that 2 of the guys that you touched on earlier, Ilya Miliashevich and also Cruz McClure, neither of them, obviously Cruz had a lower body injury. He wasn't in the Loyola game, and he played about, I think, 12 or so minutes against Notre Dame per the medical staff. That's kind of a sweet spot they wanted him in. But Ilya,
Right.
we have not really seen you and I both know, and I've heard personally some rave reviews from him in practice where he's just torching the guys for extended stretches and practice spurts. But neither of us have really seen yet in a game action, what does that look like? And I think one of the things I'm looking for tomorrow personally, obviously we're going to see some of Cruz, but the main thing I'm looking for is, does Ilya look more comfortable in this offense coming over from European basketball, playing for Mega Superbet? What a time it is to be coming from a team named that, by the way, Mega Superbet. But
Right.
I'm going to be looking for, does he look comfortable in this offense after taking a couple games to kind of figure out his shot and see what works and what doesn't? Because obviously, like you and I both know, when his shots are hitting, the shots are hitting. But obviously, you want to see some early indication that that's going to be happening. And I think tomorrow is one of the best chances for that, and kind of get him into a flow against an opponent that isn't going to cause him as much trouble on the offensive side of the ball that a Loyola or a Notre Dame would, who both have defenses that are good enough to potentially get them into the tournament.
Yeah, and I think just to quickly wrap up here, I think that's interesting because I think the non-conference will be important for Miljasevic to just get confidence. Again, I'm not saying his confidence is shot after 2 exhibition games. That's not what I'm saying. From what you and I are both hearing and what we see, like, again, the shot is too good not to succeed at the college basketball level. But I think at some point, you just like to see a 3 drop. I don't think he hit a 3 in either exhibition game.
Correct.
I think just for him, from a mental aspect of it, you just want to see it going. Like, again, he took a handful of shots, but you want to see the pure shots, but you just want to see it going. Just to know you can do it. Again, I don't think he has any doubts about that. I don't think the coaching staff does. But again, it's just one of those weird international to college basketball things. You just want to see, you want the proven fruits of your labor to be evident.
Correct. And I think, to be clear, like, neither of us are being tough on his early minutes. It's just he took a lot of shots that were in rhythm. They just, for whatever reason, none of them have fallen yet. And sometimes that's how it goes. But obviously, we both know that for his confidence, the sooner, not that he's going to be down on himself for 2 exhibition games where you figure out everything on the fly, but we know for a player's confidence, you want to see the shot fall. And sometimes, even though this generally isn't a thing, sometimes when you see the shot falling, you're a lot more engaged in the game and are able to make more plays because you're feeling better about what's going on in the moment. Obviously, not a lot of players have that, but I know both of us know that from a confidence perspective, you want to see the shot fall, and ideally you want to see it fall sooner or later.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. All right, Andy, right. I have one question before we wrap up. Okay?
Because I'm looking forward to this. You're on a roll tonight. What is it?
Because a game has not been played. There is 31 games. 31 games. What's DePaul's record?
You can count. What's DePaul's win total?
Yeah, what is their record in 31 regular season games?
You know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to say 18-13. That's what I'm feeling this year. I think the team, I'll even break it down for you. I'm going to say 10-1 in the non-conference. I don't know where the loss is going to come, but obviously nobody's perfect. That's going to happen. And I'm going to say we're going to go 8-12 in Big East play. And I do think, I'm not going to say who, but I think we do knock off one of St. John's, UConn, and Creighton at least once. I think this team's got that.
I think it's UConn. I really think it's UConn. Again, that's just me on a gut feel. So you had 18-13.
18-13.
I have 19-12.
Okay. I thought I was being aggressive, but you're even more aggressive than I am.
I just think that there are a lot of unknowns in the Big East. I think you can pretty much argue 5 through 11 is a total crapshoot. Nobody knows blank about how that's going to handle. Again, you can watch whatever preseason polls or whatever rankings. They all have a different arrangement of those, 4 through 11, 5 through 11 top bottom-ish teams in the Big East. So I think there are wins to be had. So that's why I'll say it right now, 11-12. Or sorry, 11-12. 19-12.
Okay.
There you go.
Like you said, there's people that have us, one of the guys at CBS has us in 6th place, and there's somebody that even has us in 12th. So we'll kind of see as the season goes on somebody got us in 12th place, obviously. Well, as the season goes on, we'll see kind of what that looks like. But no, there's a lot to look forward to, and I think tomorrow night's going to be the first taste of what's going to be a revitalizing season for this program. So I want to give a quick thanks to Blue Demon Nation for coming out supporting this podcast, and to Big East Energy Network for hosting us. And we look forward to bringing you another show later in the week. Guys, thank you for being here and watching us. See you next time.
So long, everybody.